So when I was doing this presentation, I was shocked to find by CNBC that 22% of events occur because of some kind of insider threat. That number to me seemed very high. And then I saw it echoed in Mandiant, which is another company think tank that does studies. And that blew my mind. So I dug into that number and they found that it's not always malicious. What it sometimes is someone being used and manipulated through social engineering. So that made a little bit more sense. But for this case, we don't know which it is. Friday afternoon, you're getting ready to go enjoy the weekend. We have a couple really nice weekends, and this fall so far came in quick, so it's a little chilly, but I think the weather's pretty decent, if I'm being honest. But Friday afternoon, Ina's like, no, it's too cold. But Friday afternoon, you're getting ready to go out and enjoy your weekend, and the file shares begin to vanish from employee workstations. File shares are like folders that you all share to drop things in, and they've been beginning to go away. So like if you have a Q drive, you put certain products in, it's all missing. Customers begin to call you informing you that deliveries that were supposed to happen today didn't happen. You normally have a regular delivery schedule, and an employee digs into this a little bit and is like, oh, that's a weird little problem, and finds that there are discrepancies between quotes, invoices, and work instructions that never used to be there. So what do you do? Now, I've titled this slide The Saboteur, but I'm going to guess most of us aren't going to immediately think sabotage. Right? So I've prefaced this for you to think, oh, there's an insider threat. So ignore that for a moment if you can, and in the future I won't put that title up. So I've learned something today. But ignore that if you can. Imagine that this starts to happen, and this is a Friday afternoon. How do you begin to discover what's going on? And once you discover that there are files that have been potentially changed or don't make sense, what is your process for determining why those files don't match up with what you would expect to be there? If you looked at your IT department, could your IT department tell you when files were changed and by whom? Yep. So the answer is theirs can. Okay, so that becomes a really important tool. Now, if yours can't, and that's okay because we're dealing with smaller businesses here, right? I'm bringing this up because how long would it take you to discover that files have been changed if you can't readily access that information? How long do you think it would take you to figure out that this wasn't just a mistake, that files had been accessed and changed? So obviously, if you can discover and you see that someone has accessed these files when they shouldn't and changes had been made, you're going to have a conversation with that person. Yep. You're going to take them offline and you're going to look at what those changes were, what they should be. If you can look at that information, you can probably pull a recovery of the file from before it was changed. Then you're okay. You've got some courses. You've identified a saboteur, and they're probably either going to be remedially trained or not there anymore, okay, depending on what you discover. But if you can't discover that information, or you don't know to look for it, or you don't know where to look for it, the reason I bring this up is, what's your logging process? What's your monitoring process? Who's responsible for it? Who do you talk to? How quickly can you get that information? Okay, and I bring this up for small businesses because that's such an incredible piece of information to have. Who changed what when? Was on Facebook doing research for work. A pop-up that he didn't expect came on. He let IT know for his company, and they took him offline. They shut him down, and they did scans and forensics on his computer to make sure it's all good. And he expressed that, even though I had a reason to be there, I felt like, oh my God, what did I do? That feeling is going to be in your employees, and why we talk so much about having that culture of like, hey, let us know, and it's okay if you let us know. Because the worst thing that can happen is on a Friday, file shares begin vanishing from employee workstations, and employees go either A, well, it's Friday, I'm sure they're doing something, it's fine, and go home. Or B, ooh, I might have screwed up and well, it's Friday, I'm going home. And you don't know. This doesn't work unless someone tells you that any of this is happening. Because otherwise, if customers call you and say, oh, we have a delivery, it didn't show up, your assumption's probably like, well, what the hell happened to my delivery? So you're calling DHL or FedEx or whatever, and you're not looking in the right place. And the last one is, what if that employee discovered discrepancies between quotes and invoices and said, I might have screwed up, and I'm not going to tell you. And this is where we talk about how devastating it is if people don't let you know. So I have another question for this one, just to get everyone thinking and thinking terribly. How do you know the difference between an accidental mistake and something intentionally malicious in this case? You don't until you talk to them. And I said, so you're going on their word, and she said, in your gut. And I said, okay, let's see if you can have more information, though, to make that a little easier. What if you could look at the times they typically logged in and changed files and see if there's a discrepancy between her doing it, or him or her doing it at this point, and when? What if you could tell their history of making changes on a Friday to a file? What if you could tell not only what changes they made, but how many changes they've made in the last 6 months? Wouldn't that make your decision a lot easier? What we're talking about now is logging. And when we talked about earlier these security groups and putting people in certain boxes so they can't access information, there's also tools that allow you to, from that, log when people access things. What time are they logging in? Are they logging in at 2:30 in the morning? That's a little weird. Do they typically make these kinds of file changes at 3:30 in the afternoon? Or on a Wednesday at 2, and it's only affecting us now on Friday? So the question becomes, when you're a business owner, information is like everything, right? And how important all of this information can sometimes be. So I would say if you begin to run into stuff where there's discrepancies in files, maybe it's just the employee's work slips, it happens. I would be absolutely lying to you if I told you it hasn't happened to me. But if it's happened once, okay. But if this is a disgruntled employee and you're noticing weird logins, weird file changes, accessing files after they've already been submitted, things like that, now suddenly you should have more questions. And those can inform your talk with that employee. And your gut will be a lot stronger one way or the other. And also, depending on the damage involved, if you have that information and you need to pursue any kind of criminal action, or if you have an insurance and before they get involved to help you, they need certain things, if you have that information to give them, that's important. So this is the accountability piece too, right? Because now that this has happened, we're going to do that after action report, building on the first two scenarios, right? And we've built on the first two scenarios, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this incident and what we found out and what worked and what didn't work and all of that. Does that change how we approach some of these logins? Does that approach how we do accountability for our process for some of these stuff? And what changes and things like that. And so, yeah.